This is Time Other Thieves, reflections and conversations on the nature of existence. This episode originally aired in radio format on June 16th, 2022. I'm Sarah B., and today I'm going to do the first of two, maybe even three, installments on Wendell Berry, and more specifically on an anthology of his essays titled The World-Ending Fire, published in 2017. Wendell Berry is an American novelist, poet, essayist, environmental activist, cultural critic, and farmer. One of America's most powerful radical voices, Berry lives and works in the old ways on his farm in rural Kentucky. For some of this episode, I will be sharing parts of a conversation I recently had with K.P. Whaley and his husband Ed Graves, who run an organic farm in Hendersonville, North Carolina. KP also happens to be the general manager here at Asheville FM. Reading Wendell Berry inspired me to contact him about doing an interview, as Berry writes a lot about farming and how endangered the truly agrarian lifestyle has become. This lifestyle was already endangered in the late 1960s when Berry first started writing. Today, it's practically non-existent. Before picking up The World-Ending Fire, the most Wendell Berry I'd ever read was a few poems, all of them gorgeous, and his essay A Good Scythe, which I read because a previous Time Other Thieves guest, Sally Ann Morgan, mentioned it in our conversation about homesteading, which took place last August. I was inspired to read more Berry when, about a month ago, my favorite Zen priest, Edward S.B. Brown, mentioned Berry's book, The Unsettling of America, in one of his Dharma talks. I asked my husband Whitman if he owned that book, and he said yes, but suggested that a more comprehensive, official introduction to his work might be The World-Ending Fire, which contained the title essay of The Unsettling of America. I knew I could trust Whitman where Berry was concerned, and I have no regrets. The World-Ending Fire is every bit as badass as its title would suggest. I relished and reveled in every word, and I continue to take great comfort in knowing that Wendell Berry exists. I'm going to try, with each new day, to be a little bit more like him. That being said, it's worth noting that I am writing this first part of the episode in the Asheville airport, with another hour and 15 minutes to wait for a flight to Denver, where my sister lives. I've chosen a seat across from a large window at the end of a row of seats with a wall at my back and a stone column to my right to give myself the best chance of not having too many people around me. I've chosen to wear a face mask even though most of the people here are not. There's a television screen playing clips of people hurting themselves through high-risk, often stupid behaviors, like Jackass, but not as repulsive, not quite as depressing. A child cries. A little dog trots by between his owners, looking stressed out and thirsty. People chew on trail mix, chips, sandwiches. Most of them, of course, are looking at their phones. The sound of passing rolly bags grows louder and more frequent as the seats steadily fill, but I still have this whole lovely row to myself. On the way here, my husband drove us through the slow construction traffic on New Leicester Highway, past the clots of men in bright orange vests huddled around giant yellow machines on stinky black asphalt, then down Patton Avenue, past the fast food restaurants with lines of cars encircling them, and then we sped down I-26, just one drop in a racing river of cars, trucks, and gigantic semis. This river, just one of countless in the world. When I first entered the airport, it was eerily empty and quiet. There was no line at the security check. The TSA agent said I'd arrived between rushes. But now more humans have arrived and continue to arrive, and with each new addition, I feel a little more claustrophobic. Good practice for the plane, I guess, which offends both my need for personal space and my moral framework in regards to the environment and the role of human hubris and folly in its destruction. It is testament to how much I love my sister and how much I value family relationships in general that I am getting on this plane. I am not a traveler by nature, and I agree with Berry that air travel in particular is unreliable, uncomfortable, stinky, and scary. Though I know that planes are statistically safer than cars, I do not believe they are safe. I believe they are insane, and that humans are not meant to fly. If we were, we'd be birds. And I believe, as Berry does, that, quote, the air transportation industry exists to free travel from all considerations of place. Air travel reduces place to space in order to traverse it in the shortest time possible. And like gigantic buildings, gigantic airports must destroy their places and become no places in order to exist. And now they're starting the boarding process for Flight 458 to Denver. As I gather my things, a young woman walking by catches a glimpse of my book and says, "Oh, Wendell Berry." She gives me a thumbs up and a smile. I wave and smile too, though she cannot see it because of my mask. And now I resume my writing from 32,000 feet above the earth, up in the clouds where I do not belong. I wore my mask while we sat on the runway, but upon takeoff, I had to take it off. I feel claustrophobic and suffocated enough on a plane without a mask. And I heard on NPR that the air circulation is really good while in flight, not so much while still on the runway. And over half of my fellow passengers are maskless anyway. It is a full flight. The small child who was screaming at the top of its lungs before we took off has now quieted. My fingers tapping on the keyboard are barely audible over the engine hum. And what a marvel it is to be typing away while hurtling through the sky, above a planet that is itself hurtling through space and all the while spinning at a rate of 1,000 miles per hour. My father recently commented on this phenomenon as we watched the sunset from our anchorage off Cape Lookout, from the flybridge of his boat, Zingara, a 33-year-old 40-foot trawler that he purchased with his wife 3 years ago. Boats are yet another gas-fueled, motor-powered machine that humans love, another vehicle that allows us to go where it seems to me we really shouldn't. If we were meant to cross oceans, we would be fish or whales or dolphins. Which is not to say that I haven't enjoyed the time, admittedly brief, that I've spent on my dad's boat. And during my recent visit, I gained a new appreciation of the boating life in general, inasmuch as it requires significant cooperation amongst humans. Sitting on Zingara's flybridge in Beaufort Yacht Basin, I saw a married couple working together to lower the sail of their boat and tie it up, a job that eventually necessitated the help of their neighbor from one slip over. My dad was watching too, and he called out, "Do y'all need another hand?" They said they were good, and Dad said, "Okay, I was going to send Don over," referring to his neck-slip neighbor, who was busy scrubbing down the outer window seals of his boat. Everyone laughed. Seeing people work together and laugh together like this reminded me of Wendell Berry, who extols again and again in his writing the importance of such communal work and the pleasure it can bring. In his 1988 essay, Economy and Pleasure, he says that our economy is divorced from pleasure, that it, quote, completely discounts the capacity of people to be affectionate toward what they do and what they use and where they live and the other people and creatures with whom they live, end quote. A few months ago, I had an experience with my stepfather that drove home how pleasurable working together can be. He visited when I was in the middle of a room painting project, and he wound up helping me with it. And it just felt so nice to do something together, working toward a common goal, as opposed to what I so often do when visiting with family, namely talking, and of course eating. I've got nothing against eating, but I so tire of the talking. I very much relate to Elaine Bennis in that episode of Seinfeld where she agrees to go get coffee with Jerry if she doesn't have to talk. The experience of painting a room with my stepdad felt so nice, so simple but so meaningful. And I realized I wanted more of that kind of shared experience in my life. I'd so much rather do something like that for quality time with loved ones, or, say, cook a meal together, than sit around and chit-chat. Anyway, now we're flying over an endless patchwork of perfect circles and squares, literally as far as my eye can see, mostly varying shades of brown with some green here and there. What are those perfect circles and squares? If they are farmland, they sure don't look very life-producing. Indeed, they look downright lifeless. Not at all like the farmland I visited just a few days ago. drove from Leicester to Hendersonville on a Tuesday morning in early June, the sky hanging low and gray. KP Whaley, co-owner of Tiny Bridge Farm, greeted me at the bottom of the driveway. We walked over to the lower part of the property that hosted a couple big hoop houses and raised beds of vegetables.
Well, I'm sorry about the traffic, first of all. We are quickly becoming an urban farm.
KP told me that when he and his husband Ed first bought the place in 2009, they didn't have any visible neighbors. Following his gaze, I turned around and saw a shiny new subdivision of 2-story homes, all in the same style and the same color scheme. Not so little boxes on the former hillside, all made out of ticky-tacky.
We're looking across the street now, what used to be 40 acres of tomatoes when we first moved here, owned by a large ag owner in the county. And maybe 3 or 4 years ago, he decided to sell off most of that land. So that whole area has been annexed by the city, and they built 60 new homes, starting at $300,000.
But is stuff still growing there?
Yes. So what that did, the advantage is that 6 acres, what they literally did is tear down a mountain to build up the homes out of the floodplain. And then they couldn't do it right here, right across the street from us. Is about 7 to 10 acres that they couldn't do that on. And because of that, we were able to lease that land. So, before we can't lease 40 acres of field, but we could manage to afford 7 to 10 acres. Okay. So about 3 years ago, we started farming that land as well. Great. So you can see we have different tracts over there. There's about 7 tracts. Each one is about an acre. And we also partnered, at the same time that we started that lease, a woman in town, activist and organizer, was organizing Latino immigrants to become a cooperative farm. And she needed land. So we were like, hey, we just signed a lease. We have an acre we can give you. So, cool. So their track is that second track. Mm-hmm. And we partner with them. We just had a big event with ASAP and them, working with some Head Start teachers yesterday. So
must have been heartbreaking to see them tear that mountain down.
It is. We did. We tried to fight it. We organized our neighbors, and unfortunately, we're all in the county, so they didn't really care. We can't vote in city elections. We have no say in terms of who those people are that are elected. So. That was a frustrating moment. We lost that vote by 3-2. And yet, the silver lining is we really do have more land to farm now because of it. So, and I don't know, if your take on this was, idyllic country life, because we don't have that, quite frankly. And,
well, it's modern version.
And it's what we all sort of are going to end up needing because, farmland is getting sold off into properties.
What Ed and KP have experienced with developers reminds me of what Wendell Berry has to say about victorious landscapes. In his aforementioned essay, Economy and Pleasure, he writes, "We now have in the United States many landscapes that have been defeated, temporarily or permanently, by strip mining, by clear cutting, by poisoning, by bad farming, or by various styles of development that have subjugated their sites entirely to human purposes. These landscapes have been defeated for the benefit of what are assumed to be victorious landscapes." Berry cites as an example suburban housing developments just like the one across the street from Tiny Bridge Farm. KP continued showing me around the property. We made our way up the hill toward his house, an old log cabin with yellow trim, walking amongst the young fruit trees: peach, plum, pear, persimmon, Asian pear, and American kiwi.
No apple?
There's so many apples in Henderson County, we didn't feel like we needed them. But our peaches produced for the first time a few years ago, so I'm excited. The one trouble with this is we get a lot of heat, but we also get things in bloom, and then a frost might still come, late frost in April. And we lost all of our peaches last year.
Oh, man.
In the year before, we had just had them for the first time, so it's nice to see them again. They made it through the spring.
Yeah.
The other thing we have up here is a smaller hoop house, kind of like a ramshackle one, that we use as sort of a production
house?
We don't use electricity in any of the hoop houses, so we don't heat them or even put fans on them at this point. And that is challenging, but also where we're at right now. And then we have a really ramshackle shed that we have agreed we're going to tear down, and we're going to put a barn up there. We've grown, so, as I mentioned, the BCS tractors, small handheld tractors that we've been using, weren't big enough, so we invested into a larger Kubota, full-size tractor. And we don't have parking for it, so we really need storage. So the property slopes down to Clear Creek. Its advantages are that, we get nice soil, and the flooding that happens is usually good most of the time. Flooding has consistently increased over the course of our ownership, so when we moved in 2009, our neighbors said, "Oh, what are you planting here for? You're gonna, this place floods about every 2 years." And now, 13 years later, it floods twice a year. So climate change, has really affected it, but also development has affected it because homes go in, lots of pavement gets created in land surface that used to,
Suck it
be
up.
able to absorb it. So we're really having some real troubles with flooding.
At this point in our conversation, Ed was walking up the gravel driveway, having been in the field across the street in the part of Tiny Bridge Farm that sits adjacent to the flood-worsening housing development.
Hi, Ed. I'm
And
Sarah.
This is Ed.
Nice to meet you.
So Ed is the grower and planner and spreadsheet maker. He is all things really the farm. And we just got to this point, so we've been back in this space since 2017. And we started farming it right away again. We both were working our full-time jobs, and then in March, Ed quit his full-time job this year. So
That's awesome.
now he's full-time on the farm.
You feeling good about it?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a crew Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and they're just amazing. And then Monday, Tuesday, I just kind of do like tractor work and planning, computer work.
Computer work notwithstanding, Ed and KP are
A lot more like old-timey farmers than most farmers. We don't have a ton of fancy equipment. We dry farm our large field across the street, which is I think unique for a commercial production farm around here, because obviously your yields will be bigger if you're irrigating, but that's how generations of people farmed before us. Farming was perfect in the 50s or the 40s. There wasn't a lot of chemical sprays, pesticides, herbicides. People just used old tractors and hand tools. And that to me seems like the right scale for the kind of farming that I want to do.
Ed has degrees in agriculture and rural sociology from the University of Wisconsin, and he worked on organic farms through high school and college and in public libraries for 20 years. The aforementioned job he just quit to do farming full-time was a library job. KP grew up around farms, but learned more about management, business, and marketing through a career in food cooperatives, worker collectives, and public radio. Their primary reason for starting Tiny Bridge Farm, which they did in earnest in 2018, was their mutual desire to grow their own food and feel good about what they were eating, both nutritionally speaking and in regards to food justice, which KP defines as a sustainable model across the entire food system, wherein farmers get paid a fair wage for their labor, meaning they can save for retirement and put their kids through college, etc., and wherein food is affordable and available for everyone, and raised in a sustainable way that is respectful to the earth. It's worth noting that the small crew Ed mentioned does receive a living wage for their planting, weeding, picking, washing, and packing work. I highly recommend checking out the land acknowledgement page on their website, tinybridgefarm.com, to learn more about their property, which is located on the same footpath leading up into the Blue Ridge Mountains that was once neutral hunting grounds for both the Cherokee to the north and west and the Catawba to the south and east. Ed, KP, and I continued the rest of our conversation on their front porch. From this point on, the intermittent background noise you'll hear is cars passing by, and of course the occasional semi. I asked KP what CSA stands for.
Community Supported Agriculture. And so the whole concept of CSA is that the customer pays you up front in February, March, and then you have money then to buy, soil amendments and seeds and do all the things you need to get things started. And then they, are buying a share of the farm in a sense, and they'll get the reward or the lack of reward depending on how well the season goes.
They sign up knowing they might not get any.
Yeah. Like a flood could happen and, we'll be delayed.
Can you imagine having so much of your livelihood dependent on the weather? I mean, all of our lives are dependent on the weather because, as Wendell Berry points out, food doesn't come from money, but from the earth, which is itself dependent on the weather. But farmers feel this dependence much more immediately than the rest of us do. I was curious to know how Ed and KP dealt with the stress of that. And this is Ed talking.
I guess the stress of it is we watch our weather apps and obsessively check. There's this weather station out of Greer, and they always have a major rain event infographic page, and we're constantly refreshing that. But yeah, I mean, it happens. It's happened almost every year that at some point in the season we've flooded, and then we just kind of have to start all over planting. And it's a lot of work to farm 5 acres, mostly by hand in small tractors. So, it's really sad when all your work, you just have to spend the next month or so cleaning up.
Yeah.
And replanting.
That Fred event that it took out all of our tomatoes and, in the height of the season.
The thing that has given me a lot of peace, I guess, is that this year we got a crop insurance policy. So we just have to keep meticulous planting records of what we plant, and then we report that to the Farm Service Agency, USDA, and our insurance agent.
Farmers are nothing if not practical. Got anxiety about floods wiping out your crops at the height of the season? Get crop insurance. But that isn't as easy as it sounds.
Crop insurance, organic standards, all of those things that you run through the FDA, it's really difficult for small farmers because it's not USDA.
Yeah.
Crop insurance, for example, you have to have a quarter of an acre of one particular crop before you can even insure it. A quarter of an acre is several, 100-foot rows, and we might plant, only a 50-foot bed with something. Right. So that's not even available to us. This new insurance that he got is different, and we literally got the first policy in the country to help those small farmers.
Basically, organic certification, crop insurance, any of those federal programs. It's a lot easier for a bigger farm that only grows a dozen crops, maybe, to do all the record keeping and keep up with all the certifications than it is for a smaller, diversified farm like ours where we have 40 different crops. So, with organic certification, you have to kind of have a crop rotation plan so that you're rotating crops around the field, and that needs to be spelled out and you have to stick to it. And so the certified naturally grown certification is a little more flexible for us because something may change in the course of the season where we'll plant beans instead of okra in one field,
Right. So that's problematic, right? This certification.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then the other, it's expensive too. So you have to certify each thing. So we'd have to certify our fruit and certify our vegetables and certify our eggs, and each one is several $100s.
Yeah, there's just a lot of barriers still for small farmers to get their products into a supermarket. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, it's insane. You go to Whole Foods or Earth Fare, the apples are obviously months old from frickin' Washington.
Right. So, there's sort of supply chain and distribution barriers there, too, in terms of distributing local food. So that's why there's these other avenues like food pantries and farmers markets and school lunches or co-ops.
And I think it's also capitalism, right? It's really about money. And if you can go to the grocery store and buy produce for, pennies on the dollar, it's because the federal government subsidized the giant agri-farms to make those prices come down.
Yeah.
So when a small farmer like us brings, the same produce to a buyer in one of those locations, a store or even the food co-op, they are like, I can get this from California for a lot cheaper. So why would I buy it from you?
I'll tell you why. To support your local economy. If you can afford to pay extra for locally grown food, that would be a more responsible move than buying certified organic food that's been shipped across the country. In his 1998 essay, In Distrust of Movements, Wendell Berry says that, quote, "It is unrealistic to expect a bad economy to become a good one, and therefore we must go to work to build a good economy." He says that it's, quote, "appropriate that this duty should fall to us, for good economic behavior is more possible for us than it is for the great corporations with their miseducated managers and their greedy and oblivious stockholders. Because it is possible for us, we must try in every way we can to make good economic sense in our own lives, in our own households, and in our own communities." He says that we must give up all hope and belief in piecemeal, one-shot solutions. Still, I couldn't help but ask Ed and KP.
If y'all were in charge of agriculture in this country in general, what would you...
country? Oh my god.
If you could rewrite the paradigm.
I think it's like sort of the system that supports farming in this country is really designed to benefit bigger growers. There's like lobbyists and like just a few corporations that kind of control a lot, like a significant amount of the like food chain, food supply. And it's just like, if we were in charge, oh my god, I would redistribute that money to like local food hubs, cooperatives like KP was kind of mentioning, basically grow the free lunch program, food stamps, like build the infrastructure to make it easier for people to to buy their food locally.
I think collaboration is really the key.
Yeah.
And I just think, if we all decide that we are going to feed everybody in Western North Carolina, we'll figure it out. If you remove the competition, if you remove the barriers through the finances that are going in other places, I'm sure we could figure that out. And so I think the answer is smaller farms feeding families that are close to them, and more of them. If we have funding, how can we use that funding to make our lives easier as farmers with the goal of providing food justice for everybody in our community?
I asked KP if he had any plans to quit his full-time job and focus exclusively on farming. He said maybe in about 5 years that could happen, given that the farm was at a more self-sustaining place by then.
If we can get to that point where we have weekends free, or, we can take a vacation, friends over for dinner, take a vacation together, not separate.
Right.
Then that's good. That's good enough.
Y'all been doing separate vacations?
Yeah, for like a few years now, just because we have dogs and the farm, that's like something that needs to get picked or watered every week, every day. And
again, we're growing through the winter as well, so you'd think that most downtime would happen, in that November to March time frame, and it does. It slows down, but we still have work to do. So, So we're constantly moving, and I think because we had those other jobs, if we took a vacation, it was to see family, and so we would just end up doing separate trips because of it.
I can definitely relate to the whole separate vacation thing. I'm on a separate vacation in Colorado as I write this, both because I enjoy having one-on-one time with my sister, and because it's such an undertaking for my husband and I to leave town together, as it would not only necessitate hiring a pet sitter for our 2 dogs, but also paying extra or finding another person to water our multiple gardens. While in some respects it's a bummer that we can't travel together more often, I've also come to see it as largely a good thing. It means that we've really put down roots, literal and figurative, where we live, that we have become a part of where we live. The primary function of our home is not just, as Wendell Berry says in his critique of industrialism, the consumption of purchased goods. In his 2002 essay, The Agrarian Standard, Berry says, One of the primary principles of industrialism has always been to get the worker away from home. From the beginning, it has been destructive of home employment and home economies. So if Ed and KP both worked non-farming jobs that necessitated they both leave home every day, or in the more modern post-COVID version, work on a computer every day from the comfort of home, then they might then be able to more often leave home together for more extended periods in the form of vacations. But then they'd be participating in the travel industry, driving cars and flying in planes and eating in restaurants, possibly staying in hotels, all at Mother Nature's expense. There's a great quote in the Sunbeams section of this month's Sun magazine, wherein Pulitzer Prize-winning American journalist Ellen Goodman says, "Normal is getting dressed in clothes that you buy for work, driving through traffic in a car that you are still paying for in order to get to the job that you need so you can pay for the clothes, car, and, especially, the house that you leave empty all day in order to afford to live in it." You might say that the ease with which a person, couple, or family can leave home for extended periods is directly proportional to how much they belong to at home. In an essay titled "A Few Words on Motherhood," first published in 1980, Wendell Berry references Henry David Thoreau, who once asserted that people should not belong to farm animals. He says this doctrine has, quote, "received amendments to the effect that people should not belong to children or to each other. But we all have to belong to something, if only to the idea that we should not belong to anything. We all have to be used up by something. I gladly belong to my wife, my children, and several head of cattle, sheep, and horses. What better way to be used up? How else to be a farmer?" This notion of belonging to something, or multiple somethings, also evokes what Berry has to say about limits and limitlessness in his 2006 essay, Faustian Economics. He says that we have tried to define freedom as an escape from all restraint. But Berry points out that the word freedom has etymological roots in the word friend. The words freedom and friend, quote, "come from the same Germanic and Sanskrit roots, which carry the sense of dear or beloved. We set our friends free by our love for them, with the implied restraints of faithfulness or loyalty. This suggests that our identity is located not in the impulse of selfhood, but in deliberately maintained connections," end quote. And these friends can be beloved fellow humans, or farm animals, or domestic pets, or a house, or the land itself. In that same essay, Berry also comments on how being limited in our ability to roam hither and yon at will is not a confinement, but rather, quote, "an inducement to formal elaboration and elegance, to fullness of relationship and meaning. A small place, as I know from my own experience, can provide opportunities of work and learning, and a fund of beauty, solace, and pleasure, in addition to its difficulties, that cannot be exhausted in a lifetime or in generations." When I asked Ed and KP what they have learned over the course of their farming venture thus far, KP touched on this notion of limits, saying that he's discovered what his weaknesses are, and that there are some things he's simply never going to be good at, like tractor repair. The limits imposed by time and the seasons necessitate that he accept his own limits and focus on what he can do, and find support from his community for what he can't. As Wendell Berry says, agrarian, as opposed to industrial, farmers see, accept, and live within their limits. They understand and agree to the proposition that there is this much and no more. This is the understanding that induces thrift, family coherence, neighborliness, local economies. Ed echoed this affection for family coherence and neighborliness when he said that farming has taught him how to communicate better, both with KP and with his employees.
Is there anything else y'all want people to know about farming in general, or?
I mean, I think it's important for people who sort of look at it idealistically, that there's so much work. Like, it's getting harder and harder. So if you want to be idealistic about it, think about food justice and think about, how you can play a part in that.
We were talking before about growing your own food, how people should learn how to do that. I really think, anybody can learn something about growing a plant or something to eat. no matter where you live. So I would say that farming as a lifestyle is really rewarding. Just to like have your hands in the dirt, but also to eat what you grow, to share it with other people, to try new things, to feel your own growth. We just want to grow more food to share with more people.
Yeah, and build community too. I'm a community-focused person, and I think here we're not in Asheville, we're in a different community, and we found our community through this process. As a gay man or a gay couple in a very conservative part of Western North Carolina, that's not always easy to do.
This being a show whose main focus is the exploration of spiritual and philosophical ideas, I wrapped up my conversation with Ed and KP by asking if either of them identified as spiritual. They both initially said no, not in any categorizable way, but they also both agreed that they feel a spiritual connection to the land. Here's KP.
I think there are things that you can do with intention that makes a big difference in the results and outcomes. Mm-hmm. So I think, spending time in nature and with it and understanding it and communicating to it is helpful.
Yeah. How do you communicate to it?
Well, I think just like, that could be meditation. And meditation could be, we do a weekly walkthrough of the farm. It is meditation. It's like we're talking about what's growing and what needs help and what is the next task.
Connecting with the plants.
But yeah, you're really communing with your farm. There's so many parts and growing things and life that is part of this farm. And it's nice to sort of spend time with it instead of just moving on to the next task. So we do that once a week.
My husband and I have a daily ritual of walking the perimeter of our yard together, checking in with the fruit trees. He planted 24 of them a couple years ago, mostly apple, and admiring the wildflowers and various vegetable gardens that Whitman maintains. We have a good system. He grows the food, I cook it. I'm often barefoot when we do these yard loops. You might recall me extolling the benefits of earthing a few episodes back, which means I'm walking very slowly, much like one would do in a walking meditation, so I'm sure not to step on anything poisonous or prickly or poopy. I like to think the fruit trees benefit from our regular attention. We often stop to touch them, give them a loving shake and some encouraging words. I like to think the fruit trees also benefit from birds alighting on their branches. Our only cherry tree bore fruit for the first time this year, but the birds ate them all before they even ripened. So that is our offering to the birds, who bring us so much joy with their beautiful songs and bright colors. Eventually we'll figure out a way to save some cherries for ourselves, but this year was a wash on that front, and that's okay. I want to give big thanks to KP Whaley and his husband Ed Graves for speaking with me about their agrarian lifestyle and the importance of supporting local agriculture. I left their farm feeling inspired to change my own consumer habits. While my husband does grow a lot of food, it's not nearly enough to completely sustain us, so we still do a lot of grocery store shopping. But thanks to my conversation with Ed and KP, I am now determined to do a lot more shopping at farmers markets. And the day after we spoke, I went to an Asheville farmers market for the very first time. I've lived in the Asheville area for almost 8 years, and I've never been to a farmers market here. For shame. And I have no excuse aside from being a creature of habit and lazy. But my experience at the River Arts District Farmers Market was thoroughly lovely, and I left with fresh strawberries, cucumbers, summer squash, sweet potatoes, honey, and a loaf of artisanal sourdough bread. My plan for the rest of the summer is to buy most, if not all, of my produce at farmers markets. I made a list of them and their days and hours of operation and plan to check out all of them. And instead of choosing recipes to build a grocery list around, I'm going to create meals around whatever I get at market. I've started reading Edward S.B. Brown's book, No Recipe, Cooking as Spiritual Practice, in the hope that it will help me hone my cooking instincts and rely much less on recipes. I will also be basing an episode on that book in the very near future, rest assured. Now I'm writing this in the Denver airport. You might recall the Wendell Berry quote from the beginning of the episode. Like gigantic buildings, gigantic airports must destroy their places and become no places in order to exist. So I'm on the other side of my aforementioned Colorado journey, waiting for my flight home to Asheville. The difference between this airport and the Asheville one is absurdly stark. Getting to my gate here required the use of an elevator, an indoor train, an escalator, and multiple moving sidewalks. The Asheville airport doesn't even have those things. And of course, I much prefer it. If our human need to fly creates a need for airports like this one in Denver, then we should look much more critically at our need to fly. But it's obviously too late for that kind of self-scrutiny. Obscenely massive airports are just one of countless examples of how truly insane the human race has become. I'm actually surprised we're doing as well as we are, psychologically speaking. I'm surprised, for example, that there aren't more mass shootings and other instances of people deliberately destroying each other. It's proof of our truly, truly good hearts that we're hanging on as well as we are. Almost an hour has passed now, and we are 40 minutes late to board, and none of the kind people at Allegiant Airlines have said a word to us. Not a single update or explanation as to why they're running behind schedule. I honestly don't even care about the reason. I just want someone to acknowledge us all waiting here. I am doing my best to be a good little Buddhist and not get angry. The waiting without any kind of update or acknowledgement would be hard enough, but the fact that I'm surrounded by other people exacerbates my difficulty tenfold. With each thud of my pounding heart and the pain in my constricted throat, I feel the truth in Jean-Paul Sartre's famous words, "Hell is other people." And more specifically, in this moment, hell is other people's children. May I be safe, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I live with ease. And may I never, ever fly again. Except for in August when I'm taking a road trip to Canada with my dad and will have to fly back from Toronto. After that, may I never step foot in an airplane or airport ever again. We finally boarded and then sat on the runway for about an hour while waiting for the ground crew to load everybody's luggage into the plane. I had to go into full-on meditation mode at that point, remembering how Edward S.B. Brown once said that even in times of difficulty, one breath continues to follow the next. So I just focused on those breaths, and I remembered that people endure a lot more difficulty than delayed flights and endless taxiing. I thought of the people in Ukraine. I thought of the parents whose children were shot to death in school. Now we're flying over the same perfect circles and squares from before, only this time they're obscured by smog. The few clouds that are up here are nestled in a bed of toxic brown air, if you can call it that, partly created by the very machine that's now flying through it, a machine I've paid good money to fly in. 45,000 such machines traverse the U.S. skies every day. 16,405,000 a year. At any given moment during peak operational times, there are 5,400 aircrafts in the sky. As Wendell Berry writes in his 1969 essay, The Rise, which concludes his anthology, The World-Ending Fire, we still sing America the Beautiful as though we had not created in it by strenuous effort, at great expense, and with dauntless self-praise, an unprecedented ugliness. I want so badly to love my fellow man, but in moments like this, when I'm not only subjected to airplane culture, but participating in it, contributing to it, such love feels impossible. I hate the world we've created. I hate feeling like a victim of what Wendell Berry calls moral slavery, meaning that I have no choice but to do what is wrong. And in that hatred lies a cold comfort. If this plane crashes and I die, at least I won't have to be a part of this terrible world anymore. And obviously that plane did not crash, and I am still alive, and very glad to be so. But my capacity for appreciating life is equal to my capacity for despairing over it, and there's nothing quite like air travel to tip the scales in the latter direction. To tip them back toward joy usually involves the things that have little to do with any of mankind's creations. I agree with Wendell Berry that the events of man are not the great events. The rising of the sun and the falling of the rain are more stupendous than all the works of the scientists and the prophets. The wildflowers silently bloom in the woods, exquisitely shaped and scented and colored, whether any man sees and praises them or not. A music attends the things of the earth. To sense that music is to be near the possibility of health and joy. I'm Sarah B., and I'm going to continue my discussion of Wendell Berry and some of the ideas he explores in the essay anthology, The World-Ending Fire, in the next episode of Time Other Thieves, as I've really only scratched the surface of what he has to offer. Thanks again to KP Whaley and Ed Graves for contributing to this episode by sharing some of their knowledge where agrarian farming is concerned. Their website, again, is tinybridgefarm.com. When their work gets especially tough, I hope they'll remember how Berry said, "I can think of no better form of personal involvement in the cure of the environment than that of gardening. A person who is growing a garden, if he is growing it organically, is improving a piece of the world." In honor of Berry saying that the falling of the rain is more stupendous than all the works of the scientists and the prophets, I'm going to leave you with the sound of this thunderstorm I recorded today. Today being June 14th, 2022. Thank you for listening, and take care.